Centers, that's not something kids have at home, right? They don't have centers in their bedrooms at home. This is a uniquely school experience. So we have to set our kids up for success. What does it look like and sound like and feel like to be in centers at center time? And that is exactly what's included in the center time visual routine. In today's episode, we're covering how to create successful centers in your classroom and how to keep them running smoothly so you'll have more time for teaching and your kids will have more time and opportunities for learning. And if you listen to the very end, I'll tell you how you can get your hands on a set of free center blueprints that will make your teacher life so much easier. So here's the thing about center time. It should be a joyful, fun, and playful time of the day, but all too often it ends up being a huge headache. Can you relate? Because you spend all your time putting out fires instead of teaching and facilitating learning. It can be so challenging to set up, organize, and make centers work in the early childhood classroom. There are so many different parts and pieces that need to be in place to make it all flow effortlessly. Here are just some of the things you have to consider when it comes to setting up centers in your classroom. How long should center time be? How many centers should you have? What should you put in these centers? How should you organize the things in the centers? Where should the centers be located in your classroom? What if your classroom is the size of a broom closet? How will your kids know which centers to go to? Is it just a free-for-all? What if your kids don't clean up? Are you tired yet? I know I'm exhausted just from reading this list, and these are not all of the questions you may have. You see, I spent 20 years in the classroom, and I've been mentoring teachers for the last 11 years. And during that time, I've tried so many different center methods, but the truth is there isn't one method that's the very best. Different methods work for different age groups and class sizes, and there is no magic pill to make it all run smoothly. But before we dive in and start breaking it all down, let me tell you a story about a time I was mentoring a teacher who was new to pre-K. Let's call her Ashley. So I was visiting Ashley's classroom right about the time centers were supposed to start. So she had a list of the students' names on a clipboard, and she called out their names and told them what centers they were supposed to go to. They sat at the center area, like at a little table, and they waited until she rang a bell to let them know when they could start playing. And so they had center time, everything was going well, and then it was time for cleanup. And so she rang her bell, right? That's a good thing. And all chaos broke loose. I'm sure you can't relate. Kids were just like screaming, throwing things, and some kids were just kind of wandering around. And there were some kids who finished cleaning rather quickly, and they went and they sat on the carpet. And so at about the 5-minute mark, those kids that went and sat on the carpet, nobody had come and joined them yet. There were like 4. And they started to get confused, like, okay, we're here, but nobody else is. Maybe it's still time to play. And so they got up and they went back to playing. And so now nobody is cleaning up. There are a few kids who are trying, but it's really chaotic. And at one point, this little boy started crying. And I got down, and she was trying to help the other kids clean up in other areas. And so I got down on his level. I asked him what was wrong, and he had 2 giant puzzle pieces, one in each hand. And he held them out to me, and he said, "They don't fit." This had really upset him because he was trying to clean up, but it wasn't working. So I asked him to show me what he was talking about. He took me over to this area where they had some puzzles on a shelf. And I quickly saw that the box that they were putting the puzzle pieces in, those cardboard boxes are not the best. And it was stuffed full. Half the pieces were broken because the kids were trying to shove them in. And there was no room. There was definitely no room for any more puzzle pieces for this little guy to put in. So I took the puzzle pieces from him and I said, "I'll figure out how to fit him in there later. Why don't you go and sit down?" And so he was fine with that and he went. But the most interesting thing happened next. So after I took the puzzle pieces from the little boy who'd been crying, another little boy walks up to me and he has his hands in his pockets, one hand in each pocket. And he looks up at me with these really big eyes, like just like he just had this realization or something. And he reaches into those pockets and he pulls out something in each hand and he shows me. And what is in each hand is a teddy bear. You know, one of those teddy bear counters that you usually have in the math center. They're different colors. He had one in each hand and he just held them out to me like he was giving them to me. And I said, "Oh, we need to find a place for these." Right. And he just kind of looked at me, acknowledged me. He wasn't going to talk to me. That's fine. I was a stranger. I took the teddy bears and then I looked around and I was like, well, I'll just show him where they go. Well, I couldn't figure out where they went because like there were things strewn all over the shelves. Things were just kind of thrown haphazardly here and there. I didn't see any labels. And I was like, oh, I don't know where they go either. So again, I told this little guy to go sit down. I kept the teddy bears in my hand. And while the last of the kids were finally cleaning up about minute 15 into cleanup time, I saw a shelf that had a bunch of like little pencil cases on it. And there was one that was blue. And when I looked, it had the word in Sharpie written on it, teddy bears. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I lifted up. I put the bears inside. So yeah, it was a little chaotic. Now, the point of this whole story is not that Ashley was a bad teacher. In fact, she went on to become Teacher of the Year several years later. The point of this story is that despite having a consistent routine in place for centers and cleanup, there were a few missing ingredients that were making centers more difficult for Ashley and her students. It was like rolling a boulder uphill. Cleanup time was dragging on forever, which resulted in chaos and confusion on the part of her students. You see, they knew that the bell signaled cleanup, but they weren't able to do it effectively because the centers weren't organized and the items weren't labeled or housed appropriately. So here are some methods that you can use to fine-tune your center time and make it run much more smoothly. And some of these are from my teacher resource bundle. So first up are center labels. So this is what Ashley needed, right? She was new to pre-K. She didn't have oodles and oodles of time to be creating things from scratch. She needed a little help to label the tubs on the shelves in her centers. And so that's what we have in the center tub labels. They're pictures along with words to go, and you just print and cut and put them on the ends of every single tub, both ends. Both ends. That's the best way. That's the best method. And then you put another label on the shelf, and then the kids match the tubs to the labels on the shelves. This makes cleanup go so much more smoothly. Oh, and the tubs that you use need to be open on the top. When we have tubs that have lids that close, that's when kids run into problems because then they have to make sure that whatever it is fits in there. They have to know how to open and close it. And then you start stacking things and it gets even more complicated. And then we end up back with that out of control, chaotic type of cleanup. So open tubs, single layer, right? Unless you have those shelves that they're like almost like cubbies. And you're going to have a label on both ends of the tub and a matching one on the shelf. That is what Ashley needed. And next up is the picture schedule. So you know how Ashley was reading from a piece of paper that she had on a clipboard, and she was telling them which centers to go to and so forth. The kids didn't really know like what to expect. There wasn't a visual to go with center time, right? So what Ashley needed was a picture schedule, a visual picture schedule, right? And so that's also in the Teacher Success Bundle. So there's a picture for each different component of the day, right? For each different thing that's happening, there is a picture along with words that you can edit. So if you're teaching in a different language or you use different terminology for centers, you can do that. And then there's many to choose from. You can create them so that they match everything that you're doing. And then you print them out and you can put them in a pocket chart, glue them to poster board, put magnets on them, and put them on your magnet board, however you want. But the picture schedule is a super important component of making your whole day run smoothly, not just center time. And so that's what she needed to indicate that it was center time, to give the kids a visual and let them know And when she did that, she could also say, and then after centers comes blank. Because a lot of the confusion that the kids were having was, okay, center time is over. What's next? I don't know. There was no picture schedule, so they didn't have that visual anchor to let them know what comes next. And when kids know what comes next, they can heave a sigh of relief. They feel safe and secure. It helps create that calm, consistent classroom routine that I know that you want. And the third thing is the center visual routine. So centers, that's not something kids have at home, right? They don't have centers in their bedrooms at home. This is a uniquely school experience. So we have to set our kids up for success. What does it look like and sound like and feel like to be in centers at center time? And that is exactly what's included in the center time visual routine. So it shows what kids do there in centers. What can you do? What can you do in the writing center? What can you do in the art center? What can you do in the block center, right? These are all the things that kids might not know. These little simple reminders can often get them back on track when they're starting to wander off, right? Oh, I'm going to take these cubes and shove them up my nose, things like that. It gives them little reminders and also starting points, jumping off points, right? For kids who are like, I don't know how to write. I don't want to go there. Like, what's that about? Like, writing is for big people. And you can show them that this is what you can do in the writing center. So the center visual routine is going to be super, super helpful. Another thing that Ashley's classroom lacked was kind of a visual planning component to the centers. So she was telling the kids where to go, looking at her personal printed list. But what if that was flipped on its head and we invited the kids to look at pictures of all the centers, right? And now you can do this by taking photographs of them, or in the center rotation packet, there are pictures of each center that go along with the center signs as well, that show the kids pictures of the centers. You can label them however you want, and they come with labels as well. And then you can organize them in a pocket chart, put them on a poster board, however you like to do it. But what it does is it allows kids to visually see all the centers in one place. They can center plan, right? They can decide where they're going to go. They're going to make a plan for their centers, basically, right? And also, if you have any kind of a crowd control method. So if you have a super large class, like more than 20, you're going to have to do some kind of crowd control, right? A free-for-all works great when you have a smaller class, but when you have 20 or more, there's a little bit of crowd control that needs to go on. And so in that case, you can group centers into like this quadrant and that quadrant into 4 different quadrants. And then you can organize those pictures on a chart, and you can assign students to certain quadrants. They can freely choose whatever they want to play in that quadrant, but this is going to help just manage that super large class a little bit easier. But again, it's all about those visuals, letting the kids see those pictures, inviting them to come up. So instead of releasing them to centers by telling them, okay, so-and-so and so-and-so go to this center, it would be, why don't you come up and look at the chart? These 2 or 3 kids or however many, and they're going to look at the chart and they're going to plan where they're going to go, right? And this is also a great opportunity for problem solving, right? So if you have limits on certain centers, you're going to be like, oh, well, you wanted to go to sand and water table or sensory table, and there's 2 spots there because you can put little dots under them or whatever to indicate how many kids can be there if you have that system. If it's free for all, that's fine too. But if there was a limit, you could say, let's look over there. Oh, I see Francisco and Maria are already at the sensory table. That's 2. And how many people can play there? Let's count. 1, 2. Oh, is there room for you at the sensory table now? No. Let's make a second choice, right? So if they don't get there first, they can make a second choice. And that is very, very powerful. Another thing you can do is put a sign-up sheet next to the center, just a clipboard with a piece of blank paper. And if indeed that child is waiting for Francisco and Maria to leave the sensory bin, then he or she can just write their name on the list, and little 3M hooks right there. You can hang it up. I like to tape a piece of string and then tie a pencil onto it. This just makes it seem so official. And they really like that. So a center rotation or center management chart of some kind. And then the last thing, there are many other things that you can implement, but the most important last one is the cleanup routine. So it was very evident that the children in that classroom, they needed some kind of support for cleanup, right? They needed to know exactly what it was that was expected of them, where they were supposed to go when they were done, quote unquote, done cleaning up, and what was going to happen next, right? So they needed that visual routine. And so the cleanup visual routine is really going to give them that extra boost that they need, right? So it's a way you can introduce, this is what cleanup looks like, this is what it sounds like, because so many of them at home, we know that they may be invited to clean up sometimes, but they're not mandated to. And quite often it's mom who ends up cleaning up, let's be real, right? Even if you're a teacher, sometimes you end up cleaning up your own personal children's messes at home because it's just easier. Because home is not a classroom. So anyway, you're going to have this cleanup visual routine. It has pictures, it has explanations. So in the math center, I can put the cubes in the tub. In the writing center, I can put the crayons in the tub. And it just goes on, and it shows pictures of kids putting things back into the bins. Okay. Very, very helpful with the cleanup routine, establishing that routine, keeping the routine consistent, and then revisiting the routine whenever the kids need a reminder. So you're probably wondering what happened to Ashley, right? Well, when she put her center materials in open tubs and added a label to each end of the tub, a picture label with words, and that same label on the shelf, she cut her cleanup time in half. Yes, I said half. Then she implemented a visual picture schedule that helped her shave another few minutes off cleanup time because her students knew exactly what came next. She also implemented that visual center chart, which allowed her students to plan their play, and it invited them to make choices. And finally, she reviewed the routines and procedures for cleanup time using visuals. And with a much smoother center time in place, Ashley had more time for teaching, and her students had more fun and more time for learning. And I haven't forgot about those center blueprints I promised you. You can grab a free copy of my Center Essentials Guide that answers all of your burning questions about center time, like how to set up centers in your classroom, how many centers should you have, what should you put in each center, and more. You can grab it at the link below this video. Until next time, I'm Vanessa Levin. Onward and upward.